It's an honor to be here. When I got a call from Shilpa yesterday that, there's a keynote to be done, I was a little taken aback, such short notice. But then Sam gave me a call and said, look, this has to be done. And when Sam says that, you can't refuse a friend. Sam is well known, I think, to a lot of friends here. But then what do you say to a bunch of hard nosed, highly experienced professionals about their job? So a tough nut to crack on that. But okay, then I fall back upon my experience, not only in the army, but also having been a professional of infrastructure in the army. I'm from the Corps of Engineers. And so therefore one has looked at massive scales of infrastructure, uh, getting all the paperwork done to get it sanctioned, getting it executed, maintaining it. Alongside that, it wasn't just about residential buildings or office complexes. The office complex or the fantastic building that you see in Headquarters Southwestern Command in Jaipur is a magnificent palace, actually, a little bit overdone if you ask me. But that is the one which finally I had the honor to get commissioned. And I had, at that time, General Bipin Rawat come and cut the tape for it. But doing the fine tuning towards the end and making sure all systems were go was a Herculean task during my tenure there. But one also saw some very interesting structures coming up, underground structures for the Air Force, for their weapon areas, dangerous weapon areas, um, extension of runways, especially the Lohegaon runway in Pune, um, creation of a hover port near Okha for the Coast Guard. And then at the end of it, it all just came back to maintaining, running the show, because that's what gets the biggest brickbats on a day to day basis, and which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with out here. So, that apart, I was also Secretary General of the Highway Operators Association. And then I'm now with the think tank, a mentor at the National Defense College with MIGS Global Consulting. And I also do an advisory with a transport infrastructure company which is based in UK. So with all that as a background, I'm not going to tell you anything new, but I'm just going to scratch on a few probably hidden surfaces here and there. So the topic that one is going to be talking about today is cybersecurity being completely intertwined with facilities management. And this is something which has recently come close to my heart as I sit where I am these days in the think tank, and we closely interact with the National Security Council, especially the National Cybersecurity Advisor or the coordinator, and a few other defense cyber agency and a few other industry houses. But let's come back to the topic. For the past couple of decades, I think facility managers have steadily, to some extent, overlooked cybersecurity. While cybersecurity is gradually and inexorably rising in its importance, no debate on that. Buildings, essential services like water, electricity, HVAC are particularly vulnerable, more so because interoperability between operational technologies and information technology increases. All of these come from multiple stakeholders and manufacturers and vendors. As a result, your physical and digital risks have become conjoined and form ever increasing threats. We are now going to have an explosion of IoT devices and connected OT as 5G comes into India. So let there be no doubt that real estate managers will have no choice but to reboot their cybersecurity strategies in the face of these growing risks. There's an IBM report of 2021, not too long ago, which talks about interconnected OT devices coming under cyber attacks. Guess how many percentage times higher over a year? 2,200% in a period of 9 months, January to September. And this is not only got implications at a corporate level, but also at the national security level. Now, take the case of an commercial office in Canada, which was attacked by ransomware. The ransomware shut down the BMS, the building management system, damaged the central plant's equipment, and it cost thousands of dollars. In another case, attackers infiltrated around 4,500 internet connected video cameras and then got a huge ransom on that. Just the other day, there was a gentleman sitting in my office who, in front of me, hacked into video cameras in a Japanese port. And you could make out every activity that is happening in that port. A huge amount of cyber espionage is happening all the time, and we don't even know about it. It could be industrial espionage, it could be security. And what makes me shudder is perhaps that Hikvision camera, which is located somewhere in South Block or in North Block, is sending messages across, or is already been hacked into, and is sending messages across many borders, especially to our adversaries. And to highlight that, I had another gentleman who came to me and said the Australians have approached him for exactly the same thing that I spoke of. Cameras hacked into. So they know exactly who's walking in and out of every office in Canberra. And the Australians have come back to him, and he's developed a tool which is now going to block that. I'm trying to convince our fraternity to take that. So there is a level of, I would say, apathy towards this as complacency, and many times people don't scratch that surface for fear of coming up with something which may be unpalatable. So cyber attacks target emerging technologies such as digital twins, artificial intelligence, and can pose, obviously, not only espionage threats, but also the threat of controlling your systems. AI algorithms are vulnerable and can suffer from data poisoning. Data inputs can be maliciously twisted around. And so the inputs that you get from your AI algorithms may be false. In fact, maybe actually feeding you completely false information. And therefore, that needs to be also kept in mind. We are clear that although facilities managers don't need to understand cyber security in its full complexity, that could be with the IT managers and the IT department, but we must educate ourselves about the threats and build a secure culture in our organization. I would say firms should embed cybersecurity into their operations, set clear organizational responsibilities with a risk-based approach, implementing a clear defensive strategy when it comes to our systems. I do understand everybody here is not unaware of the risks that are there. In fact, many are highly qualified. I was just talking to Ajay Sharma, a cybersecurity expert, if I may say. But a survey carried out by Honeywell not too long ago said that 70% managers, 7 out of 10, are concerned about whether they have adequate level of operational cybersecurity to protect their facilities. 7 out of 10 are concerned about it. Imagine what it would do for healthcare facilities, corporate data centers, because that will not only be a financial setback and operational setback, it will be a social crisis which would get created. Lives would be lost. 27% of facility managers in surveyed geographies experienced a cybersecurity attack in 12 months in the year 2022. 2/3 of them consider OT cybersecurity as one of the most challenging aspects of their jobs, your jobs. These surveys were conducted over more than 1,500 facility managers in the US, Germany, China. We are not even talking about India. Despite those concerns, only 44% respondents had a cybersecurity solution in place. And only 1/3 of them have made investments, put money where their mouth is or where their mind is in cybersecurity protection over a year. The plans were also not there. So, India, in any case, is yet to address this issue, given all its merits or demerits as you look at it. Imagine the situation over 3 years. 5G comes in, things get IoT controlled. People are peeping into your bedrooms. People are peeping into your information systems, maybe even controlling your information systems. The havoc that it can create is unimaginable unless you and I get into it. Let's take a look at the basic block, the building systems which are put into place. The single biggest block of cybersecurity and vulnerability in this is in the corporate world in a building. Now, the building has got all its comfort and security, two classified places. So, you have your video surveillance, you have your VoIP telephone, and you have your office machines. Then you've got your sensors that are driving your heating systems, air ducts, cooling systems, water, temperature. All these are impacting the safety of a building's occupant. Most of these are unmonitored all the time. These are unsecured backdoors for anybody to hack in. And remember, these backdoors can be fatal if you're in hospitals, as I said earlier, utilities, medical devices. During a discussion, we even went to the extent of saying somebody could hack into your pacemaker if he wishes to. It's a form of assassination that we are going to look for in the future, but that is not part of facilities management. So there's a Harvard Business Review research that said 60% of all cybersecurity breaches were launched through the computer systems of suppliers or contractors. This had gone up by 25% just about over 2 to 3 years. And this I'm talking of, the figure I'm talking of is 2017. Things have changed now. 1,400 companies have been breached by nation states. And that's an entirely new form of warfare. We all know that before Russia attacked Ukraine, Ukraine was bombarded with cyber attacks. During our conversations with the vice president of Microsoft, who had come down here, and a closed door discussion that we had with him, he outlined to us the nature of attacks that had come out and where we were trying to compare as to where we stand. And it can be a little difficult to imagine how we're going to put our act together as soon as possible. But they are done by nation states. And all of them that they did in this survey of over 1,400 companies were using 3 building control devices: VoIP telephones, video recorders, office machines. Simple stuff. Other building systems used in successful cyber attacks, you all know HVAC, elevators, the works. What happens is building control contractors evolve from actually construction contractors and become system integrators. And then they are the ones who have somehow put a system together. That is where the leakages are happening. Now, cyber attacks focus also obviously on exploiting the data from all the sensors that are there in smart buildings, and most of them have zero protection. Such attacks take control of the sensors, subvert them, and cause dangerous behavior in various systems which are running in your facilities setup. The turbines, the water, the air. There's this infamous example of Stuxnet. Everybody knows about it. We've been talking about it. What did it do? This malware disrupted Iranian centrifuges in their nuclear facilities. So we know about that. Just imagine, these were monitored systems. We here are talking about unmonitored systems. And there's the Triton malware. It's called the world's most murderous malware. It caused disruptions in and an emergency shutdown in Saudi Arabia in a petrochemical plant. You don't even need drones for that now. So, the ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline, the fuel supplier on the east coast of the United States, how much did they pay? Apparently, they ended up paying $4.4 million. Of course, later on, the FBI got 50% of it back. But when JBS USA was attacked, it's a meat supplier in the USA, nothing came back. And $11 million were lost in ransomware. So this is a really difficult issue when you're doing remote monitoring and remote control of your various sensors. And obviously, Colonial was doing remote monitoring, and more so, let's look at it during COVID periods, mostly remote monitoring. What do you do in your building facilities? Mostly remote monitoring. And that makes it more vulnerable. So what do we need to keep in mind? I think facility managers should be very clear that they have to retain the leadership between the vendor and the organization. Somebody has to take that responsibility. And senior managers must remain concerned with the security practices that your vendors are undertaking when installing or servicing that organization. Each vendor has to be made responsible for developing his own cybersecurity hygiene, and this has to be put down probably in a written statement with him for specific security protocols that he has to install. Sometimes a specialty vendor may require some financial assistance as well, and this has to be understood by the board of that company if it has to give financial assistance to a vendor. So then all these hygiene factors have to be installed in agreements and statements, and liabilities can then be transferred as a bargaining chip onto the vendors. So just a short word about co-opting IT and OT. So we are all aware that the IT department is very conscious about cybersecurity attacks. But how does IT and our OT come together? Usually there's a little bit of gap between the two. The IT is focused on data and communication, whereas the OT is focused on behavior and outcomes. So in a SCADA system, there are 4 primary functions: the data acquisition, the network data communication, the data presentation, and then the control. Of course, you have the human-machine interface, and then you have a communication infrastructure that's the backbone to all this. All these need to be kept in mind. And as IoT comes in, at some point we are expecting IoT may start overriding a SCADA completely and get rid of it. So the IoT will then have to ensure that all these factors are protected individually. From a IT department's perspective, to my mind, the OT systems are many times just out of sight, unless the level is raised in their case. Now, this is despite the fact that some years ago, 2 years ago, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, warned that there are 83 million IoT devices vulnerable due to remote access in specified geographies. So remote access is the one that now is going to be the name of the game and the vulnerable point as well. So data has then become a focus. Data breaches in facility management pertain not only to unauthorized access or theft of sensitive information of a facility, but it also includes data on employees, vendors, customers, building operations. I mean, the whole works. Personal identifying information, financial data, building security protocols, and all this we have to do while we still don't have the DPDP in place. We were involved with the DPDP, and number of us went back to the Ministry of IT, and full kudos, I think, to Mr. Chandrasekhar, that for the second time he withdrew the bill from Parliament, not tabling it, because it still needs a lot of improvement. So we are still struggling with it. Indonesia just did it, came out with its own DPDP bill act last year. Of course, the EU regulations are fantastic. Now, with all this environment, we still have to work our way into it. But we know that some of the common causes are human error, cyber attacks taking place, malwares, insider threats, physical threats of records and devices. All these are the causes of a data breach in a facility management setup. Of course, we'll need intelligent maintenance management platforms in preventing data breaches. Remember, hackers are trying to get into your data for three things: the thrill of it, the curiosity of it. The second would be getting ransomware. And the third, of course, is a feeling of power, which very few will be able to experience unless we are hackers ourselves. Many of these hackers are sponsored by nations and have a huge resource base behind them and protection behind them. So they have everything going for them, whereas we at the corporate level have to work within our own resources. So what mainly can we do at our level? I think employee training for awareness is the key element. Positive reinforcement must be helpful. I would recommend that we go through exercises like sending fake emails through internal sources, encouraging employees to flag those reports, and generally building a culture of network safety with customers and business. Of course, technology will also help. Most importantly, I think facility managers must make sure that none of their systems are exposed to the web, at least as far as possible. Secondly, managers should make sure that they have control over the remote access. Leaving the control with the vendor is the last thing that we should be doing. And facility managers should regularly carry out an inventory of all devices and keep them up to date. Basic exercises and drills that we need to carry out. I would also recommend that we keep our systems segregated so that the OT systems, as far as possible, are segregated from internet and from other systems so that the surface area of attack is reduced. One of the main things has to be collaborative and communication between the IT department and the OT department. IT department must understand where all the facilities lie and how they are unprotected. So otherwise they don't naturally gravitate towards it. They tend to stay within the office equipment and within their own area of comfort. We'll have to work out what if scenarios and make suggestions to the IT so that everything is within their grasp as to where our vulnerabilities lie. So at the end of it, I would say transparency, honesty, open communication between them is what we would be looking for. I hope this helps kind of put a little focus into the discussion, at least from the cybersecurity point of view. You have a lovely panel coming up and look forward to hearing from the experienced and knowledgeable people about that. I look forward to it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.